envelope sat on my kitchen table like a tomb. White, crisp, official, final. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, the gold band on my left hand catching the late afternoon light for the last time. 5 years of marriage reduced to signatures on dotted lines. "Just sign it, Eliza," I whispered to myself, my voice echoing in the emptiness of the apartment that had once vibrated with promises of forever. Just sign it, and be done. The pen felt heavier than it should have as I scrawled my name, Eliza Ricci, soon to be Eliza Collins again. The ink bled slightly at the edges, as if even it knew this was all wrong. But Daniel had made his choice. 3 months ago, I'd discovered the texts, the hotel receipts, the perfume that wasn't mine. The classic story of a husband who'd found someone younger, someone who hadn't spent the last 2 years crying over negative pregnancy tests. The irony wasn't lost on me that this morning's test had been different. I glanced at the torn pieces in the trash can. 2 pink lines that had appeared too late. A cruel joke from a universe that had never been particularly kind to me. I wasn't going to trap a man who no longer wanted me with a child. I wouldn't tell him. I couldn't. My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. My sister, Mia. "Did you do it?" she asked without preamble. "Just did," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's over." "Good. Now get dressed. I'm taking you out tonight. No arguments." I started to protest, but knew it was pointless. Mia had decided I needed distraction, and once she set her mind to something, resistance was futile. Besides, maybe she was right. Maybe what I needed was loud music, meaningless conversation, and enough alcohol to numb the hollow ache spreading through my chest. "Fine," I conceded, "but nothing fancy." "I'm not in the mood to dress up." Mia's laugh tinkled through the phone. "Darling, it's my treat. We're going somewhere special. Wear that black dress I bought you for Christmas. The one with the slit." I hung up knowing I'd end up wearing exactly what she suggested. That was our dynamic. She pushed, I yielded. It had been that way since we were children, and despite everything, I found comfort in its predictability. At least some things never changed. The dress hugged my body in ways that reminded me I was still young. 28, not ancient, though the emptiness inside me felt prehistoric. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed despite the careful makeup, hair falling in loose waves over bare shoulders. I looked like someone playing dress-up, pretending to be whole when pieces of me were scattered in the divorce papers on my kitchen table and the torn pregnancy test in my bathroom trash. Mia arrived in her typical whirlwind, all expensive perfume and rapid-fire chatter. "You look gorgeous. See? I told you that dress was perfect. He was an idiot to let you go. Where are we going?" I asked, ignoring her comment as I slipped on heels I hadn't worn in months. "Alchemy." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. My stomach dropped. "The new club downtown? Mia, there's no way we're getting in. That place is impossible." She dangled a small black card between manicured fingers. "Not with this, it isn't." "How did you get that?" I reached for the VIP pass, examining the embossed gold lettering with suspicion. "I know people who know people." She shrugged, the gesture dismissive in a way that made me uneasy. Mia had always moved in circles slightly above our middle-class upbringing, but lately her connections seemed increasingly mysterious. The club pulsed with energy and money, both flowing freely beneath dimmed chandeliers and between bodies draped in designer labels. Mia navigated the space with practiced ease, nodding to security guards who stepped aside without question. I followed in her wake, feeling increasingly out of place despite my careful appearance. "Relax," she whispered, squeezing my hand as we were escorted to a private section cordoned off by velvet ropes. Tonight is about new beginnings. The VIP area overlooked the dance floor from an elevated position, allowing its occupants to observe the crowd while remaining separate. Only a handful of tables populated this exclusive space, each surrounded by beautiful people exuding the quiet confidence of those accustomed to privilege. "Mia," I hissed as we were led to an empty table. "What exactly are you not telling me?" Her smile flickered with something I couldn't name. "Just trust me. I promised I'd look after you, didn't I?" A server appeared with champagne we hadn't ordered, pouring 2 glasses before disappearing. I took mine, grateful for the distraction and the alcohol. "To freedom," Mia toasted, raising her glass. "To freedom," I echoed, though the word tasted bitter on my tongue. The champagne was excellent, probably more expensive than anything I'd ever tasted. I was contemplating this, how strange it was to celebrate the dissolution of my marriage with such luxury, when I felt it. A shift in the air, a ripple through the crowd below. Something had changed. I turned instinctively toward the entrance, where a small commotion was taking place. The crowd parted like water around stones for 3 men moving through the club. Even from my elevated position, I could feel their presence, particularly that of the man in the center. He moved with liquid grace, unhurried yet purposeful. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that looked like it cost more than my car. His dark hair was cut short, severe against olive skin. I couldn't make out his features clearly from this distance, but something about him made my skin prickle with awareness. "Who is that?" I asked Mia, not taking my eyes off the trio as they approached the VIP area. She followed my gaze, her expression unreadable. "That's Luca Moretti." The name meant nothing to me, but the reverent way she said it told me it should. "And he is the owner of this club, among other things." She sipped her champagne, watching me over the rim of her glass. "He's also the reason we're here." I snapped my attention back to her. "What are you talking about?" But Mia's eyes had moved past me, her smile widening into something practiced and bright. "Mr. Moretti, thank you for the invitation." I froze, suddenly aware of a presence behind me, a subtle cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to raise their voice to be heard. Slowly, I turned. Luca Moretti was more striking up close than I'd expected. Early 30s, with features that belonged on ancient Roman coins, strong jaw, straight nose, full mouth set in a serious line. But it was his eyes that caught me, dark as midnight, intelligent, and currently fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Ms. Collins." His voice was deep, touched with an Italian accent that caressed rather than stumbled over English. "Your sister said you'd be joining us tonight." The plural caught my attention immediately. "Us?" My eyes darted to Mia, who avoided my gaze. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding," I began, rising to my feet only to find myself oddly unsteady. Moretti stepped forward, one hand catching my elbow to stabilize me. The touch burned through the thin fabric of my dress. "Are you feeling unwell?" The room tilted slightly, colors bleeding at the edges of my vision. "I just need some air," I managed, though my tongue felt oddly heavy. His eyes narrowed, flicking to my half-empty champagne glass before turning to Mia. Something passed between them, a look I was too disoriented to interpret. "Marco," he said sharply, and one of his companions stepped forward. "Take Miss Collins to my office. She needs to lie down." "No," I protested, trying to pull away, but my limbs wouldn't cooperate. "Mia, what's happening?" My sister's face swam before me, guilt warring with determination in her expression. "It's for your own good, Eliza. You'll understand." "What did you do?" I whispered, but darkness was already creeping at the edges of my consciousness. The last thing I remembered was being lifted into strong arms, the scent of cedar enveloping me as Luca Moretti's voice rumbled against my ear. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you, Eliza." 5 years later, I had built a new life far from my past. New name, new city, new purpose. My small bookshop on the outskirts of Boston barely broke even most months, but it was mine, and it was honest. I'd become Catherine Hayes, Cat, to the few friends I'd allowed myself to make. No one knew about Elizabeth Ricci, about the night that had changed everything, or about my daughter Sophia, a bright-eyed little girl who had just turned 5, with dark hair and eyes that sometimes sent shivers down my spine, with how much they resembled a man she'd never met. That Tuesday afternoon was like any other, crisp autumn light spilling through the windows of Lily's books as I helped Sophia with her coloring at the small table near the children's section. The shop was empty of customers, one of the perks of owning a bookstore in the digital age. Plenty of quiet moments with my daughter between the occasional browser. "Mommy, Can we have ice cream after my doctor's appointment tomorrow? Sophia asked, her little tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully filled in a dragon's scales with purple crayon. If you're brave with the needle, absolutely, I promised, pushing back the familiar anxiety that came with each of Sophia's hospital visits. The anemia had been diagnosed when she was 3, a rare condition requiring regular transfusions and checkups. The doctors were still searching for better treatment options, including potential bone marrow donors with her rare blood type. I never told them who her father was. As far as the hospital was concerned, he was unknown, a one-night stand whose name I couldn't recall. It was easier that way, safer. Halfway across the country, in the penthouse office of one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings, Luca Moretti was concluding a business meeting when his private line rang. Few people had this number, only those he considered family, or those who might as well be, given how deeply they were embedded in his organization. He glanced at the display, frowning slightly at the unfamiliar number with a Boston area code. Dismissing his associates with a nod, he picked up on the third ring. "Moretti," he answered, voice clipped and professional despite the curiosity stirring within him. "Mr. Moretti? This is Dr. Patel from Boston Children's Hospital." The woman's voice was formal, clinical. "I apologize for contacting you directly, but our database flagged your information as a potential match for one of our patients, and the matter is somewhat urgent." Luca leaned back in his leather chair, brows furrowing. "I believe there must be some mistake, doctor. I have no connection to any patients in Boston. According to our records, you registered as a bone marrow donor 6 years ago during a charity drive in Chicago." "Is that correct?" The memory surfaced, a public relations move suggested by his legitimate business advisors. Good optics for the hotel chain that served as the cleanest face of his diverse business interests. "I recall something of the sort," he confirmed cautiously. "Mr. Moretti, we've found that you're a rare 10-point HLA match for a 5-year-old patient with a severe form of aplastic anemia. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and you're the only compatible donor in the National Registry." His fingers tapped against the polished surface of his desk, mind calculating the risks of any involvement with a public institution. "While I sympathize with the patient's situation, I fail to see why this requires my personal attention. Surely there are procedures." "The patient's name is Sophia Hayes," Dr. Patel interrupted, an unusual urgency in her professional tone. "Her mother is listed as Catherine Hayes, but our genetic screening indicates a familial relationship to you. The timestamps match precisely with your donation registration." Luca went completely still, a cold clarity washing over him as the pieces aligned with devastating precision. "Did you say the child is 5 years old?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Yes, she'll be 6 in January. 5 years and 9 months since Elizabeth had vanished from his life without a trace. Despite his relentless search, the timing could not be coincidental. "Send me everything you have on both the child and the mother," he ordered, already pressing the intercom button for his security chief. "I'll be in Boston tomorrow." The phone call from Sophia's doctor came the next morning. Not Dr. Patel, her regular physician, but the head of hematology, a development that sent ice through my veins before he'd spoken more than a greeting. "Ms. Hayes, we've found a donor match for Sophia." His voice contained carefully measured excitement. "A perfect match, actually. It's quite remarkable." I sank into the chair behind the shop counter, relief and dread warring in my chest. That's wonderful news." I managed to keep my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "When can we schedule the procedure?" "The donor has been contacted and is actually flying in today. If you could bring Sophia for preliminary tests this afternoon, we can begin preparations immediately." Something in his tone made me pause. This donor, they're coming specifically for Sophia? That's unusual, isn't it? A brief hesitation. The donor is highly motivated to help. That's all that matters for Sophia's treatment. I pressed my fingertips against my closed eyelids, fighting the suspicion crawling up my spine. "Of course. We'll be there at 3. After hanging up, I stared blankly at the shop's empty aisles, the colorful spines of books blurring as possibilities raced through my mind. Bone marrow registries were anonymous. Donors and recipients weren't supposed to meet until at least a year after transplant, if ever. Someone flying in specifically for Sophia's case was not normal protocol, unless they already knew who she was. "Mommy, can I have another cookie?" Sophia's voice pulled me from my spiral of panic. She stood in the doorway to our small apartment above the shop, dark curls tousled from her nap, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. I forced a smile. "One more, then we need to get ready. The doctors called. They might have found a way to make you better." Her small face lit up. "So no more needles? There might be more needles for a little while," I explained gently. "But then hopefully a lot fewer after that." As Sophia nibbled her cookie, I moved through our apartment on autopilot, packing her favorite comfort items for the hospital visit. All the while, my mind raced with calculations. If my suspicions were correct, we had hours, at most, before my carefully constructed facade crumbled. 5 years of hiding, of looking over my shoulder, of jumping at shadows, all about to end. I'd never told anyone the full truth about that night 5 years ago, or the weeks that followed. How I'd woken in a penthouse apartment I didn't recognize, with Luca Moretti watching me from across the room. How he'd explained with chilling calm that my sister had owed him a substantial debt, a debt he'd agreed to forgive in exchange for me. "Your sister seemed to think you needed saving from your situation," he'd said, dark eyes unreadable as they studied my reaction. A convenient arrangement for all parties involved. I'd been kept in that apartment for nearly 2 months. Not as a prisoner exactly. The doors weren't locked, but the security throughout the building made leaving impossible without Luca's knowledge. He'd been not kind, but not cruel either. Attentive, possessive, intense in ways that should have terrified me, but instead awakened something I'd never felt with Daniel. When I discovered I was pregnant, everything changed. The revelation hit me like a physical blow one morning as Luca was leaving for business. The missed period, the nausea I'd attributed to stress, the tenderness, all suddenly falling into place with devastating clarity. I'd fled that night, using the one security gap I'd discovered during my weeks of careful observation. The 30-minute window when the guards changed shifts and Luca was at his weekly meeting with his captains. I'd taken nothing but the clothes on my back and enough cash to buy a bus ticket to anywhere. My only mistake had been using my real name at the hospital when Sophia was born. A rookie error born of pain and exhaustion and the emergency C-section that had left me too weak to think clearly about aliases. I'd corrected it afterward, becoming Catherine Hayes with help from a sympathetic nurse who'd assumed I was running from domestic violence. But that initial record existed somewhere. And now, somehow, it had led him to us. Boston Children's Hospital was a gleaming monument to modern medicine, all glass and bright colors designed to seem less intimidating to its young patients. Sophia skipped ahead of me through the entrance, her illness momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the play area in the lobby. I followed more slowly, every nerve ending on high alert. The elevator ride to the hematology department on the 5th floor felt endless. I gripped Sophia's small hand in mine, trying not to show the fear threatening to choke me. She looked up, her dark eyes, so like her father's, wide with innocent concern. "Are you scared, Mommy?" I knelt to her level, brushing a curl from her forehead. "A little, but only because I love you so much, and want you to be all better." She nodded with the solemn wisdom only children can muster. "It's okay to be scared sometimes." "Doctor." Patel greeted us with her usual warm professionalism, but I detected an unusual tension in her movements as she led us to the examination room. She seemed to be studying Sophia with new interest. Or perhaps I was just projecting my own paranoia. "We'll need to draw some blood for preliminary testing," she explained to Sophia, who immediately looked to me for reassurance. "Then we'd like to do a quick scan to prepare for the procedure." "Will it hurt?" Sophia asked in a small voice. "Just a pinch," Dr. Patel promised. "You've been so brave with all your treatments. This is no different." As the nurse prepared for the blood draw, Dr. Patel gestured for me to step outside the room. The hallway was quiet, most of the day's appointments already concluded. "Ms. Hayes," she began, voice lowered, "I want to be transparent with you. The donor match for Sophia, he's requested to meet with you privately before proceeding." Cold washed through me. "That's against protocol." "It is," she agreed, looking uncomfortable. But given the circumstances and the urgency of Sophia's condition, I've made an exception. What circumstances? I asked, though I already knew. Dr. Patel hesitated. The genetic markers suggest a familial relationship between the donor and Sophia, a close one. I closed my eyes briefly. He's here, isn't he? In my office. She looked at me sympathetically. I don't know your situation, Ms. Hayes, and it's not my place to ask. But this man may be Sophia's only chance. The thought of Sophia, pale and increasingly weak from the transfusions, her small body fighting a battle it couldn't win without help, hardened my resolve. I would face the devil himself for my daughter. I'll speak with him, I conceded. But not until Sophia is settled with her tests, and I don't want him anywhere near her yet. Dr. Patel nodded. Of course. We'll need about 30 minutes for the blood work and scan. My office is at the end of the hall when you're ready. The walk to that office 30 minutes later felt like a march to the gallows. Each step took monumental effort, my body fighting against the inevitable confrontation waiting behind that door. I paused outside, hand hovering over the knob, gathering the fragments of my courage. I had rehearsed this moment in nightmares for 5 years. What I would say, how I would explain, whether I would beg or stand defiant. None of those mental preparations seemed adequate now that the moment had arrived. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Luca Moretti stood at the window, his back to the door, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. He'd always possessed the uncanny ability to fill a room with his presence, and 5 years had not diminished that power. If anything, the man before me seemed larger, more substantial than the one I remembered. Or perhaps it was just the weight of what lay between us. He turned slowly, and I fought the urge to step backward. His face was leaner than I remembered, the angles sharper, a new scar tracing a thin line along his jaw. But his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, were exactly as I'd remembered them, exactly as I saw them each day in our daughter's face, Elizabeth. My name in his mouth felt like an invasion, a claiming. It's Catherine now, I replied, proud that my voice remained steady. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, more an acknowledgement of a move in a chess game. Of course it is. Silence stretched between us, electric with unspoken accusations. I forced myself to step fully into the room, closing the door behind me. How did you find us? I asked finally. I didn't. Fate did. He moved away from the window, each step measured and deliberate. Quite poetic, don't you think? Of all the bone marrow donors in the world, the only match for our daughter is her father. The casual use of our daughter sent anger flaring through me. She's not. Don't. His voice cut like a blade, though he hadn't raised it. Don't insult both of us with denials. I've seen her. The timing is exact, and the genetic markers confirm it beyond any doubt. I swallowed hard. You've seen her? Through the observation window during her scan. She has my mother's curls. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't identify. You should have told me. So you could what? Add a child to your collection of possessions? The words spilled out, sharper than I'd intended. Use her as leverage to keep me trapped? He moved then, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. I flinched, but held my ground as he stopped just inches away, close enough that I could smell the familiar cedar notes of his cologne. Is that what you think of me? He asked quietly, dangerously. That I would use my own blood as a bargaining chip? I don't know what you're capable of, I whispered. That's why I ran. His jaw tightened. You ran because you were afraid. Not of me. Of what you felt for me. Don't flatter yourself, I snapped, though the words rang hollow even to my own ears. I ran because I was being held against my will by a man who bought me from my sister to settle a debt. Is that how you remember it? His expression darkened. Your sister came to me begging for protection, for both of you. Your ex-husband had connections to people even more dangerous than you believed I was. People who weren't happy about his divorce, about the money he owed them that he claimed you took. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Daniel was an accountant. Daniel was skimming from accounts connected to the Vasquez cartel. When they started closing in, he tried to pin it on you, claimed you'd transferred the money without his knowledge during the divorce proceedings. Luca's eyes never left mine, gauging my reaction. Your sister found out through one of her many connections. She came to me for help, knowing my organization had the strength to keep the Vasquez family at bay. My mind reeled, struggling to process this new information against the narrative I'd constructed over 5 years. Why wouldn't she just tell me? Would you have believed her? Or would you have run straight back to Daniel demanding explanations? He shook his head slightly. Mia knew you well enough to recognize you needed protection from yourself as much as from them. So, keeping me locked in your apartment for 2 months was protection? I challenged. Though doubt had begun to creep in, the doors were never locked, Elizabeth. His voice softened fractionally. You could have left at any time. I would have provided security, a new identity, a safe place far from Chicago. All you had to do was ask. His eyes hardened again. Instead, you disappeared in the night, pregnant with my child, and made sure I couldn't find you. The accusation hung between us, heavy with 5 years of loss and anger. Before I could respond, a knock at the door broke the tension. Dr. Patel entered, her expression professionally neutral despite the obvious electricity in the room. Ms. Hayes, Sophia is asking for you. We've completed the preliminary tests. I nodded, grateful for the interruption. I'll be right there. As I moved toward the door, Luca's voice stopped me. I'm going through with the donation regardless of what happens between us. The words were measured, controlled. But make no mistake, Elizabeth, I have no intention of remaining a stranger to my daughter after this. I turned back to face him one last time. Her name is Sophia. She's 5 years old. She likes purple dragons, chocolate ice cream, and stories about princesses who save themselves. She's the center of my world, and I will do anything, to protect her. As will I, he replied simply. It seems we finally have something in common. I left the room with his words echoing in my ears, the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again settling over me like a shroud. The days that followed existed in a strange limbo between past and present, memory and reality. Luca's presence in the hospital was impossible to ignore, not just for me, but for everyone. Staff whispered when he passed, security seemed to multiply overnight, and even Dr. Patel's typically unflappable demeanor showed cracks when addressing him directly. He moved through the hospital corridors like he owned them, which, for all I knew, he might have by now. Resources that had been unavailable for Sophia's treatment suddenly materialized. Specialists appeared from across the country. A private room on the pediatric floor was transformed overnight with better equipment, comfortable furniture, and enough toys to stock a small store. "Mommy, is that man my daddy?" Sophia asked on the 3rd day, her question cutting through the fairy tale I'd been reading to her with the devastating precision only children possess. My book tumbled from nerveless fingers. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" She shrugged, tiny shoulders rising and falling beneath her hospital gown. The nurses whisper about him, and he looks at me the way Lily's daddy looks at her. Lily was her best friend from kindergarten. Plus, she added with child's logic, he has the same eyes as me. How do you explain to a 5-year-old the complicated dance of fear, protection, and regret that had kept her father from her life? How do you justify choices made in desperate moments without shattering her innocent understanding of the world? Yes, I admitted finally, the truth a relief and a burden simultaneously. He's your father. Does he not like me? Her lower lip trembled slightly. Is that why he never came before? Oh, Sophia. I gathered her small body against mine, mindful of the IV line. No, baby. He didn't know about you. It was complicated grown-up stuff. But he's here now because he wants to help make you better. She considered this with the solemn deliberation unique to children. Will he stay? After I'm better? The question I'd been avoiding even in my own thoughts. I don't know, sweetheart. That's something we'll have to figure out together. Later that evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep, I found Luca waiting in the small family lounge adjacent to her room. He'd discarded his suit jacket, his crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and decorated with an intricate tattoo I didn't remember, a stylized wolf encircling his right wrist. "She knows," I said without preamble. Closing the door softly behind me, he looked up from the tablet he'd been studying. "Knows what?" "That you're her father. She figured it out on her own." Something flashed across his face. Pride, perhaps, or satisfaction. "She's perceptive, like her mother. She wants to know if you're staying after the transplant." I sank into the chair opposite him, suddenly exhausted. I didn't know what to tell her. Luca set aside his tablet, giving me his full attention. The intensity of his gaze hadn't diminished over the years. If anything, it had grown more focused, more deliberate. "What do you want me to tell her?" he asked quietly. "The truth would be nice," I replied, an edge creeping into my voice. "But I'm not sure either of us knows what that is anymore." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Here's my truth, Elizabeth. I have a daughter I didn't know existed until 3 days ago. A daughter who needs me. Not just my bone marrow, but me. I have no intention of disappearing from her life again, voluntary or not." The implied accusation hung between us. "And here's mine," I countered. "I have spent 5 years building a life where my daughter is safe, a normal life, with friends and school and birthday parties. Not a life where she's watched by guards or taught to fear shadows or wonders if her father will come home bloodied. Or not at all." His jaw tightened. "Is that what you think her life would have been? Tell me I'm wrong." Instead of answering, he stood and moved to the window overlooking the hospital garden, now dark in the late evening. "Things have changed in 5 years. Have they?" I challenged. "Or have you just gotten better at hiding them?" He turned, the ambient light from the corridor catching the angles of his face. "I won't apologize for who I am or what I've built, but I will say this. Everything I've done has been to secure a future, a legacy." His gaze held mine, unwavering. I never knew what for until now. Something in his tone made my heart skip. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening instantly. "We have a problem," he said. "All business now. My security team has detected unusual surveillance patterns around the hospital. Someone's watching, and not my people." Cold dread washed through me. "You think it's them? The people Daniel was involved with?" "It's a possibility we can't ignore." He was already moving toward the door. "I'm doubling security on this floor. No one enters without my personal approval." "Luca," I called after him, my voice catching. "If anything happens to her." He paused, turning back. For a brief moment, the mask of control slipped, revealing something raw and fierce beneath. "Nothing will happen to her, or to you. Not while I breathe." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of old fears and new uncertainties. The transplant procedure was scheduled for the following morning. Dr. Patel had explained the process in detail, how they would harvest bone marrow from Luca's hip bones, then infuse it into Sophia's bloodstream, where the healthy stem cells would hopefully make their way to her bone marrow and begin producing healthy blood cells. "It's not an instant cure," she'd cautioned. "The recovery period is significant, and there are risks of complications. But given the perfect HLA match, Sophia's chances are excellent." I spent that night in the recliner beside Sophia's bed, watching her sleep, her dark lashes casting shadows on cheeks too pale, her small chest rising and falling in the rhythm that had become my world's most essential sound. Fear and hope battled within me as I tried to imagine our life after this crossroads. Would Luca demand custody? Would he try to take us back to Chicago? Would I fight him if he did? Should I? Dawn broke with no answers, just the quiet routine of shift change and the soft beeping of monitors. Luca appeared at 6, freshly showered and dressed in hospital-provided clothes for the procedure. Despite the utilitarian garments, he still emanated authority, nodding to the security personnel stationed outside Sophia's room as he entered. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle as he took in Sophia's sleeping form. "Has she been resting well?" "As well as can be expected." I straightened in the chair, wincing as my stiff muscles protested. "The pre-procedure meds make her drowsy." He moved to the bedside, his movements carefully measured as if afraid to disturb the air around her. With uncharacteristic hesitation, he reached out, his fingertips barely brushing a dark curl from her forehead. "She looks like my mother," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Same curls, same stubborn chin. She has your eyes," I found myself saying, "and your focus. When she's working on something, a drawing, a puzzle, the whole world disappears for her." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My mother used to say I was born frowning in concentration. This glimpse of his past, freely offered, caught me off guard. In our time together 5 years ago, Luca had rarely spoken of his family or childhood. The walls around those memories had seemed impenetrable. "Will your mother want to meet her?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question as his expression shuddered. "My mother died 3 years ago." His voice was carefully neutral. "Cancer." "She would have loved Sophia." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. Truly. Before he could respond, Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Those dark, fathomless eyes, so like the man standing beside her. She blinked slowly, gaze moving from me to Luca, with sleepy confusion that quickly transformed into curiosity. "Are you really my daddy?" she asked, her voice small but direct. Luca went still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. "Yes," he answered simply. She studied him with an intensity that belied her years. "Where were you before?" I opened my mouth to intervene, to shield her from whatever complicated explanation might follow, but Luca raised a hand slightly, not dismissing me, but asking for trust I wasn't sure I could give. "I didn't know about you," he said, choosing his words carefully. "If I had, nothing would have kept me away." Sophia considered this. "Not even bad guys?" A flash of something. Surprise, amusement, concern crossed his features. "Not even the worst guys in the world?" She nodded, accepting this with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Mommy says you're going to give me your bone marrow so I can get better. Will it hurt you?" "A little," he admitted, "but it's worth it." "Because I'm your daughter?" "Because you're my daughter," he confirmed, and the naked emotion in his voice sent a shiver through me. "Okay." She reached out her small hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it in his much larger one. "Thank you for making me better, Daddy." The word hung in the air between them. Simple, profound, irrevocable. I watched as Luca Moretti, the man whose name was whispered in fear across Chicago's underworld, fought for composure in the face of this 5-year-old's unquestioning acceptance. "You're welcome, Piccola," he said finally, his voice rough. "It's my honor." The moment was interrupted by Dr. Patel and her team arriving to prep them both for the procedure. As they wheeled Luca toward one operating room and Sophia toward another, he caught my eye across the corridor. "Take care of our daughter," I said softly, offering the only olive branch I knew how to extend. "Always," he replied, a vow more binding than any contract. The waiting was excruciating. I paced the small consultation room, checking my phone obsessively, though I knew Dr. Patel would come in person with updates. Luca's security team maintained a discreet but unmistakable presence throughout the floor, their earpieces and vigilant postures marking them as clearly as uniforms would have. Marco, whom I recognized as Luca's most trusted lieutenant from 5 years ago, appeared periodically with coffee and quiet reassurance. "Mr. Moretti's procedure is going well," he informed me during his 3rd visit. "He's asked me to keep you updated." I nodded, accepting the coffee with murmured thanks. "Have there been any developments with the surveillance he mentioned?" Marco's expression remained professionally neutral. "The situation is being handled. Your focus should remain on Sophia." The non-answer was answer enough. Whatever, or whoever, had been watching the hospital was real, and Luca's people were handling it. I decided not to ask what that entailed. 4 hours later, Dr. Patel finally appeared, her surgical cap still in place but her face relaxed. "Both procedures went perfectly," she announced. "Luca is in recovery and should be released to his room within the hour. We've just begun Sophia's infusion. The transplanted cells are being introduced into her bloodstream now." Relief made my knees weak. I sank into a chair, covering my face with trembling hands. "When will we know if it's working?" "It will take time," she cautioned, sitting across from me. "The first 100 days post-transplant are critical. Sophia will need to remain in isolation for at least the first 30 days while her immune system rebuilds. We'll be monitoring her blood counts daily to track the engraftment process. And after those 100 days? I asked, already calculating how to manage the bookshop, how to create some semblance of normalcy in the sterile hospital environment. If all goes well, she can return home with precautions. Her immune system will remain vulnerable for up to a year, but many children return to school and regular activities within 6 months. Home. The word echoed hollowly. The small apartment above my bookshop seemed impossibly distant now, a life that belonged to someone else. I couldn't imagine Luca Moretti allowing his daughter, and by extension me, to simply return to our quiet existence in Boston as if the past week hadn't happened. When can I see her? I asked, pushing aside the larger questions for now. She's being settled in the isolation room. You can see her in about 30 minutes once we've completed the setup. Dr. Patel hesitated. Mr. Moretti has requested to see you in his recovery room first. Of course he had. Even from a hospital bed, Luca would expect the world to bend to his will. Some things never changed. I found him in a private room at the opposite end of the floor from Sophia's. He was sitting up in bed, still pale but alert, a phone in his hand, despite the nurse's likely objections to electronics. When I entered, he set it aside immediately, his focus shifting to me with that familiar intensity. Sophia? He asked without preamble. In isolation. The infusion is underway. I remained by the door, maintaining distance. Dr. Patel says everything went perfectly. He nodded once, satisfaction evident in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. Good. That's good. An awkward silence fell between us, filled with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. Finally, I took a step forward, forcing myself to bridge the gap, physical and metaphorical. Thank you, I said quietly, for what you did today, for Sophia. She's my daughter. The simplicity of his statement contained multitudes. You don't need to thank me for that. I do, though. I moved closer still, perching tentatively on the edge of the visitor's chair. Whatever happened between us, you didn't hesitate when she needed you. That matters. His dark eyes studied me, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. We need to discuss what happens next, Elizabeth. Catherine, I corrected automatically. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Not to me. Never to me. The possessiveness in those words should have angered me. Instead, they sent a treacherous warmth through my veins. A reminder of feelings I'd spent 5 years burying. What do you want, Luca? I asked directly. What's your endgame here? Family, he replied without hesitation. My daughter knowing her father. You. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You safe. Both of you. Safe from what? His expression darkened. Marco confirmed our suspicions. The Vasquez cartel has been tracking unusual bone marrow registry matches, looking for familial connections to locate you. They've never believed you weren't involved in Daniel's embezzlement. Fear, cold and familiar, slithered down my spine. After all this time, why would they still care? It wasn't just money Daniel took. He had information. Names, roots, connections. They believe you have it. He shifted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his surgical site. They've been watching the hospital. My men intercepted one of their scouts last night. Oh, God. My hand flew to my mouth, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. Sophia is protected, he cut in firmly. No one will get near her, but this changes things, Elizabeth. You can't go back to your life in Boston, not now. The walls seem to close in around me, options disappearing one by one. What are you suggesting? That I pack up our lives and disappear again? I'm suggesting you come home, he said quietly. To Chicago. With me. Chicago. The word hung between us, weighted with history and implications. That's not our home anymore, Luca. It could be. His voice remained measured, reasonable. I can provide security there that's impossible anywhere else. My territory, my people, my resources. Your world, I countered. Your dangers. He sighed, a rare show of frustration breaking through his composed exterior. The dangers exist regardless of where you are. That's what today has proven. At least in Chicago, I can control the variables. I stood, needing the physical movement to process the turmoil inside me. And what would this arrangement look like exactly? Sophia and I living in some protected compound, watched every moment? No freedom, no normalcy? Is that what you think I'm offering? A flash of something like hurt crossed his features before disappearing behind his usual mask. A prison? Isn't it? Luca pushed himself more upright, grimacing slightly at the movement. I have a home, a real home, in Lake Forest. 17 acres, woods, a private beach on the lake. Security is unobtrusive but comprehensive. Sophia could attend the best schools, have the best medical care, live a normal life. Just with protections most children don't need. The picture he painted was seductively peaceful, almost ordinary, if you ignored the implicit violence holding it all together. And where do I fit in this scenario? I asked, cutting to the heart of it. What exactly am I to you in this new arrangement? His eyes darkened. You know what you are to me, Elizabeth? No, I challenged, taking a step closer to his bed. I don't. 5 years ago, I was a possession, something you acquired to settle my sister's debt. Is that still how you see me? As something that belongs to you? Is that really what you believe happened? He reached for my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, forcing me to look at him directly. Your sister came to me terrified for your life. She'd discovered Daniel's connections to the cartel, the money he'd moved through accounts in your name. They were coming for you both. I offered protection in exchange for her working off her own debts to me. By giving me to you, I interjected. By introducing us, he corrected, his thumb brushing over my pulse point, in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. What happened between us afterward was not part of any arrangement. Memories flooded back, the initial fear giving way to fascination, then desire. The way he'd never pushed, never demanded, just waited with predator's patience for me to come to him. The night I finally had, unable to deny the pull between us any longer. You never told me about Daniel, I said quietly, withdrawing my hand from his grasp. If what you're saying is true, why keep me in the dark? Would you have believed me? Or would you have run straight back to him, demanding explanations, putting yourself directly in their crosshairs? His expression was grim. You were safer not knowing. That wasn't your decision to make. No, he conceded, but I made it anyway, to protect you. I turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot below. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware of the currents moving beneath the surface of their reality. I built something in Boston, I said finally. A life, a business, friends. It wasn't grand or exciting, but it was mine. Ours. I understand that. His voice had softened. And I'm not asking you to abandon everything immediately. The transplant recovery will take months. Use that time to decide, to prepare Sophia, to settle your affairs in Boston. I turned back to him, searching his face for deception. And if I decide not to come to Chicago? A muscle in his jaw tightened. Then I'll build you security wherever you choose to go. But I will remain part of Sophia's life. That's non-negotiable. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door preceded Marco's entrance. His normally impassive face showed subtle signs of tension. Boss, we need to move up the timeline. Our sources indicate increased cartel movement in the area. Luca's demeanor shifted instantly, the brief vulnerability I'd glimpsed disappearing beneath the mantle of authority. How many? At least 3 vehicles circling the perimeter. Local assets confirm Vasquez's nephew is leading the operation. Cold fear gripped me. They're coming here? Now? Marco's eyes flickered to me briefly, before returning to Luca. We've increased hospital security and alerted our contacts in Boston PD. The situation is contained for now, but hospitals are public spaces, Luca finished, already reaching for his phone. Too many access points, too many civilians. He made a quick call, speaking rapid Italian before hanging up. To Marco, he said, "Prepare for immediate transfer once I'm cleared. Protocol 7. Wait, I interjected, panic rising. Transfer where? Sophia can't be moved. She just had the transplant. She needs to be in isolation under medical supervision. Which is why we're bringing the medical supervision to a secure location, Luca explained, his tone leaving no room for argument. I've arranged for a private medical facility at my estate outside the city. Dr. Patel and her core team will accompany us. You can't just, I began. I can, and I will, he cut in, voice hardening. This isn't a negotiation, Elizabeth. This is Sophia's life. The blunt reminder silenced my objections. However much I disliked Luca making unilateral decisions, he wasn't wrong. If the cartel had found us, the hospital was dangerously exposed. I need to be with Sophia, I said, retreating toward the door. She'll be frightened by all this activity. Luca nodded. Marco will escort you. Don't leave her side until I come for you both. The isolation room where Sophia was recovering had been transformed in the brief time since I'd last seen it. Medical equipment was being prepped for transport. Staff moved with controlled urgency, and 2 men I didn't recognize but immediately identified as Luca's security stood discreetly by the door. Dr. Patel was checking Sophia's vitals, her professional demeanor slightly strained. She looked up as I entered, relief washing over her features. Ms. Hayes, I was about to send for you. There's been a change in our treatment plan. I've spoken with Luca, I confirmed, moving immediately to Sophia's bedside. My daughter was awake but groggy, her small face confused by the activity around her. Mommy? She questioned sleepily. What's happening? I stroked her hair, forcing a reassuring smile. We're going on a little trip, sweetheart. Somewhere quiet where you can rest and get better. But is Daddy coming too? The question twisted something in my chest. How quickly she'd accepted Luca in that role, as if the space had always been waiting for him to fill it. Yes, he'll be with us. I looked to Dr. Patel. How risky is moving her so soon after the procedure? Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't recommend it, she admitted quietly. But Mr. Moretti has arranged for equipment and facilities that match or exceed what we have here. The transport itself is the primary concern, but that will be brief. Given the security situation, it may actually be safer for her overall. I wondered briefly what Luca had told her, or offered her, to secure such cooperation, but now wasn't the time to question it. When do we leave? Within the hour. We're just waiting for final clearance from the medical transport team, and she hesitated. And Luca's security assessment, I finished for her. She nodded, looking relieved that I understood. Mr. Moretti seems very thorough in his planning. A lifetime of contingency plans and exit strategies. Of course he'd be thorough. I'd once found it suffocating. Now, with Sophia's safety at stake, I found myself grateful for his paranoia. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of preparations. Sophia was carefully transferred to a transport bed, her IV lines and monitoring equipment secured for movement. I remained at her side, maintaining a calm facade while my insides twisted with anxiety. Marco reappeared as the medical team was making final preparations. We're ready to move. The boss is waiting at the service entrance with the transport. How are we handling? I glanced meaningfully at Sophia, not wanting to discuss threats in front of her. 3 decoy transports are leaving simultaneously. Local police have been informed of a VIP medical transfer requiring escort. They believe it's a diplomat's child. His expression remained professionally neutral, but a hint of pride underlay his words. Standard Moretti protocol, the efficiency was both impressive and disturbing. How many times had Luca executed similar extractions? How many enemies had pursued him over the years? Was this the life that awaited us? Always running, always watching shadows. We moved through the hospital with practiced precision, using service elevators and back corridors to reach the loading area. Sophia, drowsy from medication, drifted in and out of sleep during the transfer, mercifully unaware of the tension surrounding us. At the service entrance, a sleek black medical transport waited, engine running. What appeared to be a standard ambulance was anything but, I realized as we approached. The reinforced exterior, tinted windows, and subtle armoring betrayed its true purpose. Luca stood beside it, still pale from his procedure, but fully dressed in a fresh suit, showing no signs of discomfort. His eyes found mine immediately as we emerged from the building, a silent communication passing between us. A shared priority that transcended our complicated history, Sophia's safety above all. Everything is prepared, he said as we reached him. The flight leaves in 40 minutes. We'll be in Chicago before dark. Flight? I asked, startled. I thought we were going to a local facility. Plans change, he replied tersely. Intel suggests the Vasquez operation is larger than initially assessed. Chicago offers better protection. Before I could object, he turned his attention to Sophia, his expression softening as he approached her transport bed. "Hello, Piccola. How are you feeling?" Sophia blinked up at him, a small smile tugging at her lips despite her obvious fatigue. "Sleepy. Are we going on an adventure?" "Something like that." He brushed his fingertips lightly over her cheek. "A special plane is waiting to take us somewhere safe, where you can rest and get stronger." "Like a princess in a tower?" she asked, her imagination transforming our desperate flight into a fairy tale. "More like a castle by a lake," he corrected gently, "with gardens for you to explore once you're well enough." Her eyes widened slightly. "A real castle?" "Real enough," he promised, sharing a look with me over her head. Asking permission, I realized with surprise. Seeking my approval for the fiction he was creating to ease her fears. I nodded slightly, grateful for his sensitivity to her emotions, despite the urgency of our situation. The loading process took only moments, the medical team working with Luca's security with practiced efficiency. Soon Sophia was secured inside the transport, Dr. Patel beside her, monitoring equipment beeping reassuringly. As I moved to enter the vehicle, Luca caught my elbow lightly. "Right up front with me," he said quietly. "There's something you need to know before we reach the airfield." Anxiety tightened my chest, but I nodded, following him to the cab of the transport, after pressing a quick kiss to Sophia's forehead and promising to be right up front. Once inside, doors closed against potential observers. Luca turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "Your sister has been trying to reach you." Mia. The name felt foreign on my tongue after so many years of silence. "How do you know that?" "Because she contacted me first, when her attempts to find you failed." He watched my reaction carefully. "She's been working with my organization since you left, helping us search for you while maintaining her own cover." The revelation landed like a blow. "She's been working for you? All this time?" "With me," he corrected. "Initially to help find you, later as our legitimate business interests expanded to Boston. She's been positioned there for nearly 3 years, watching for any sign of you or the cartel." My mind reeled with implications. "She knew I was in Boston? Has she seen Sophia?" "No." His denial was immediate and firm. "She identified several women matching your description over the years, but none were confirmed. She never knew about Sophia at all." "And now?" I asked, struggling to process this new betrayal, or was it protection? The lines between the two had always been blurred where Mia was concerned. "Now she's on her way to Chicago. She believes her cover may have been compromised in the lead-up to today's events." His jaw tightened. "The Vasquez family has made her a target as well." Guilt and fear tangled in my chest. Mia had always been the risk-taker between us, diving into situations head first while I calculated consequences. Had her loyalty to me, however misguided I might find her methods, put her in the crosshairs of people who wouldn't hesitate to use her to get to me. "Will she be safe?" I asked quietly. Something like approval flickered in Luca's eyes. Even amid my own turmoil, my first concern was for my sister, a fact he'd clearly noted and appreciated. "She's already under my protection," he assured me. "She'll meet us in Chicago." The transport began moving then, pulling away from the hospital with an escort of unmarked vehicles before and behind. Through the partition window, I could see Sophia sleeping peacefully, unaware of the dangers swirling around her, or the irrevocable changes taking place in her world. "I never wanted this for her," I whispered. More to myself than to Luca, any of it. His hand found mine in the space between us, his grip warm and solid, an anchor in churning waters, "I know," he said simply. "But we'll face it together. The contact between us, the first voluntary touch I'd initiated or accepted since our reunion, felt significant. A bridge across the chasm of 5 years and countless misunderstandings. Neither of us acknowledged it directly, but neither did we pull away as the transport navigated Boston streets toward the private airfield where Luca's plane waited, ready to carry us into a future I couldn't begin to imagine. "Do you have anything of sentimental value at your apartment?" Luca asked after several minutes of silence. "Photos? Keepsakes? Things Sophia might miss?" The practical question pulled me from deeper contemplations. "Yes. Photo albums, her favorite stuffed animals, a quilt my grandmother made, He nodded, already typing a message one-handed on his phone. I'll have someone retrieve them. Anything else can be replaced. The casual dismissal of our material life stung, though I recognized the pragmatism behind it. My bookshop can be sold, or managed remotely if you prefer. His tone was matter-of-fact. I have people who can handle either option. Of course he did. Luca Moretti had people for everything, a vast network of loyal soldiers who executed his will without question. It was both his greatest strength and, to me, his most troubling quality. I need to maintain some control over my own life, I said quietly but firmly, over Sophia's life. I can't just surrender everything to your management. He turned slightly in his seat, studying me with those penetrating dark eyes. I'm not asking you to surrender, Elizabeth. I'm offering resources, protection, options, security. What you build with those resources is entirely your choice. Is it? I challenged. When the resources come with invisible strings. The only string is Sophia's safety and well-being, he countered. Beyond that, make whatever choices you want. I wanted to believe him. Part of me, a larger part than I cared to admit, was drawn to the certainty he offered, the solid ground after years of shifting sand beneath my feet. But experience had taught me that with Luca, things were rarely as straightforward as they appeared. What about us? I asked finally, voicing the question that had hovered between us since his reappearance. What are your expectations there? His thumb traced a small circle against my hand, the gesture so intimate it made my breath catch. My expectations haven't changed in 5 years, he said quietly. But I've learned patience, and perhaps a bit of humility. Before I could respond, the transport slowed, turning onto a private road that led to a small airfield. Through the windshield, I could see a sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac, stairs already deployed. We've arrived, Luca noted unnecessarily, releasing my hand as the vehicle came to a stop. We'll continue this conversation when Sophia is settled on the plane. As he moved to exit the transport, I caught his arm. Luca. He paused, looking back at me with a raised eyebrow. Thank you. For coming when she needed you, for not hating me for what I did. Something complex moved through his expression. Pain, longing, resolution. I tried to hate you, he admitted. For about 5 minutes. Then I just missed you instead. The simple honesty of his statement hit harder than any accusation or demand could have. As he turned away to coordinate the transfer to the plane, I remained in my seat, processing the implications of those words, and the road that stretched before us, a road leading back to a city I'd fled, to a life I'd rejected, and to a man I'd never quite managed to forget. The private jet hummed beneath us, a cocoon of luxury and security separating us from the world below. Sophia had been settled in a specially modified section at the rear, transformed into a sterile medical area where Dr. Patel could monitor her condition during the flight. To my relief, she'd fallen into a deep sleep shortly after takeoff, her small body beginning the immense work of integrating Luca's healthy cells into her own. I stood at one of the windows, watching Boston disappear beneath clouds, my bookshop, my apartment, the life I'd constructed piece by careful piece, all reduced to a diminishing grid of lights below. 5 years of independence, of quiet pride in surviving, of building something that was mine alone. 5 years of looking over my shoulder, of waking in cold sweats from dreams where shadowy figures discovered our hiding place, of checking Sophia's window locks 3 times each night. Had it been freedom? Or just a different kind of cage, one of my own making? She's stable. Luca's voice broke into my thoughts as he approached from the medical area. Dr. Patel says her vitals are strong. I nodded, unable to find words for the storm of emotions churning inside me. Relief for Sophia, fear of the unknown future, grief for what we were leaving behind, and beneath it all, a treacherous current of something like excitement, the forbidden thrill of danger that had always accompanied Luca's presence in my life. He stood beside me at the window, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the familiar cedar notes of his cologne. We'd been physically closer in the transport, hands touching. But somehow this proximity felt more intimate, a choice to share space rather than circumstance forcing us together. I've arranged for a video call with Mia once we're at cruising altitude. he said, his voice carefully neutral. She's eager to speak with you. I turned to look at him, studying the profile that had haunted my dreams for 5 years. In the soft cabin lighting, the new lines at the corners of his eyes were more apparent, evidence of the years that had passed, of stresses I knew nothing about. What did you tell her? I asked. About us? About Sophia? Only that you're both safe and en route to Chicago. His gaze remained on the clouds outside. The rest should come from you. I appreciated the space he was giving me to shape my own narrative, even as questions burned inside me. How long has she been working with you, truly? He turned then, meeting my eyes directly. She never stopped. After you left, she was devastated. Blamed herself. When the Vasquez family started circling, looking for Daniel's missing money and information, she came to me for help again. I offered protection in exchange for her assistance finding you. And that assistance involved moving to Boston? Setting up some kind of surveillance network? The thought of my sister living in the same city, perhaps passing me on the street without my knowledge, sent a chill through me. Initially, she was based in Chicago, following leads across the country. When we narrowed the search to the Northeast, she relocated to Boston 2 years ago. A muscle in his jaw tightened. She found you 8 months ago. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 8 months? She's known where I was for 8 months and never made contact? At my instruction, Luca admitted, his tone unapologetic. We had confirmed cartel presence in the area by then. Making contact could have exposed you both. She agreed it was safer to maintain distance while we neutralized the threat. So she's been watching me? Reporting back to you? The violation stung, even as some rational part of me understood the protective instinct behind it. Watching over you, he corrected. There's a difference. She made sure no one got close enough to identify you or Sophia, kept her ear to the ground for any whispers about a woman matching your description. I turned away, needing distance from his intensity as I processed this information. And what about you? Have you been receiving regular reports about my life for the past 8 months? My routines, my friends, my business? Basic security information only. His voice had cooled slightly. I respected your choice to leave, Elizabeth. I didn't spy on the intimate details of your life, just its security vulnerabilities. I noted with a hint of bitterness. Yes. He made no apology for it, and it's fortunate I did, or we might not have been prepared when the hospital called. He was right, and we both knew it. Without his resources, his preparation, his immediate response, Sophia might still be in that hospital, vulnerable to the people who'd been hunting me for 5 years without my knowledge. The realization drained the fight from me. I sank into one of the plush leather seats, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to feel about any of this, Luca. Grateful, angry, betrayed, relieved. It's all tangled together. He took the seat across from me, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, missing nothing. You don't need to decide right now. We have time. Do we? It feels like everything is moving at warp speed. 24 hours ago, my biggest concern was whether the new shipment of mystery novels would arrive before the weekend. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You always did love your books. I remember finding you in my library that first week, curled up with Marquez when you were supposed to be at dinner. The memory surfaced, his massive library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, the leather chair by the window where I'd hidden, losing myself in 100 years of solitude to escape the reality of my situation. I'd expected anger when he found me. Instead, he'd simply sat in the adjacent chair and asked what I thought of the book so far. It had been our first real conversation, the first time I'd glimpsed the man beneath the fearsome reputation. You quoted the entire opening line from memory, I recalled softly. His eyes warmed with surprise that I remembered. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. The familiar words hung between us, a bridge across time and distance and hurt. I still have that copy, he said after a moment, with your notes in the margins. Before I could respond, Marco approached, his usual stoic expression firmly in place. The secure connection is established, boss. Ms. Collins is standing by. Luca nodded. We'll take it in the conference section. As Marco retreated, Luca stood and extended his hand to me, an offer of support, not a demand. After a brief hesitation, I took it, allowing him to help me to my feet. "Whatever you decide about the future," he said quietly, "remember that Mia has spent 5 years trying to protect you, in her own way. Just as you've protected Sophia, the gentle reminder of our shared priority, protection of those we loved, whatever the cost, steadied me as we moved to the jet's small conference area, where a secure tablet had been set up for the call. Mia's face appeared on the screen, and my breath caught at the sight of her. 5 years had added subtle lines around her eyes and a new maturity to her features, but her expression, anxious, hopeful, determined, was exactly as I remembered. "Eliza," she breathed, her eyes drinking in the sight of me. "God, it's really you, Mia." My voice cracked on her name, years of absence and misunderstanding and love colliding in those 2 syllables. Luca squeezed my shoulder gently before stepping away. "I'll check on Sophia. Take as long as you need." As he left, closing the door behind him, Mia's eyes followed his movement with a familiarity that confirmed their long association. "He found you," she said, something like wonder in her voice. "After all this time." "He didn't find me," I corrected. "Fate did, apparently. Or medical science." Briefly, I explained about Sophia's condition, the bone marrow match, the hospital's call to Luca. With each revelation, Mia's expression shifted from shock to understanding to a deep, complicated pain. "A child," she whispered. "My niece, and I never knew." "No one knew," I said, not quite able to keep the defensive edge from my voice. "That was the point. Why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in her question was genuine. "Even if you had to run from him, from that life, why cut me out completely? Because you were the one who put me there in the first place," I replied, old anger surfacing. "You delivered me to him like some kind of offering, a payment for your debts." Mia flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Is that what you think happened? Isn't it?" She shook her head slowly, disbelief etching her features. "Eliza, I came to Luca for help because Daniel had put a target on your back. The Vasquez family thought you were involved in his embezzlement scheme. They were coming for you, for both of us." "So Luca claims," I acknowledged. "But why the deception? The drugged champagne? Waking up in his penthouse with no explanation?" "Because you wouldn't have believed the truth," she said simply. "You were still defending Daniel, still making excuses for him, even after finding evidence of his affairs. If I'd told you he was involved with cartel money laundering, that he'd implicated you to save himself, would you have agreed to go with Luca for protection?" Put that way, her reasoning made a twisted kind of sense. The Eliza of 5 years ago had been naive, trusting to a fault, desperate to salvage some meaning from the wreckage of her marriage. "You still should have given me the choice," I insisted, though with less conviction. "Maybe." Mia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But I couldn't risk your life on maybe. Not when the Vasquez family had already killed 2 of Daniel's associates and their wives. This was new information, a darker dimension to the danger I'd been in." "Luca never told me that part." "He wouldn't have," she confirmed. "He was trying to protect you from the worst of it. We both were." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Daniel disappeared 3 days after you went to Luca's. They found parts of him washing up on Lake Michigan for weeks. Horror washed through me, not for the man who had betrayed me in every conceivable way, but for how close I had come to sharing his fate. If not for Mia's intervention, for Luca's protection." "I'm sorry," Mia continued when I remained silent, processing this revelation. "For the deception, for the years of separation, for missing the chance to know my niece. But I'm not sorry for keeping you alive, Eliza. I'd make the same choice again. The familiar stubborn set of her chin, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. This was the sister I'd known all my life. Impulsive, sometimes misguided, but loyal to her core. "She has your smile," I said finally, the anger draining away to leave bittersweet acceptance in its place. "Sophia. When she finds something funny, she gets the same crinkle at the corners of her eyes." Mia's breath hitched, tears finally spilling over. "Tell me about her, please?" As we flew toward Chicago and an uncertain future, I told my sister about her niece, about first steps and favorite books, stubborn tantrums and surprising kindnesses, the dimple in her left cheek and her passion for purple dragons. With each detail, each shared laugh and tearful smile, the years of separation seemed to narrow, not disappear but become navigable. By the time Luca returned to inform us we were beginning our descent, something fundamental had shifted. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. The beginnings of a bridge back to the sister I'd lost. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes, Luca said, his eyes moving between my face and the screen, assessing the outcome of our conversation. "Mia, the car will meet you at the service entrance as planned." She nodded. "All business now." "I'll be there." The team has already secured the perimeter. As the call ended, I looked up at Luca with new clarity. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Not just since the hospital called, since Mia found me in Boston." He didn't insult my intelligence by denying it. "Contingency planning is second nature in my world. Yes, I had extraction protocols in place from the moment we confirmed your location. For when the Vasquez family found me," I concluded. "For when, not if," he corrected grimly. They were never going to stop looking. The information Daniel stole was too valuable, and their pride too wounded. I should have felt manipulated, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. The elaborate chess game Luca had been playing while I remained oblivious had been for my protection, mine and Sophia's. The realization didn't erase the complications between us, but it framed them in a different light. "I need to check on Sophia before we land," I said, standing. Luca nodded, stepping aside to let me pass, but as I moved toward the medical section, I paused beside him. Without overthinking, I raised my hand to his cheek, the first voluntary touch I'd initiated since our reunion. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for watching over us when I didn't know we needed it." His expression remained carefully controlled, but I felt the slight lean of his face into my palm, the barest acknowledgement of vulnerability beneath the armor. "Always," he replied simply. The landing was smooth, the transition from plane to waiting vehicles executed with military precision. Sophia, still sleeping under sedation, was transferred to a medical transport, while Dr. Patel rattled off instructions to the new medical team waiting on the tarmac. I remained at my daughter's side, marveling at how easily Luca's world absorbed us, enfolding us in its protective embrace. The convoy moved through Chicago's streets with purpose, police escorts smoothing our path, though I suspected Luca's influence rather than official cooperation was responsible. As the urban landscape gave way to wealthy suburbs and eventually to exclusive lakeside properties, I watched the passing scenery with a surreal sense of déjà vu. Chicago had been my home once, before Daniel, before Luca, in the brief window of independence after college. I'd loved its energy then, its unapologetic blend of grit and sophistication. Now it felt like a foreign country, familiar in outline but strange in detail. The estate when we reached it was not what I'd expected. In my mind, Luca Moretti would live in some ultra-modern fortress, all glass and steel and ostentatious security. Instead, the gates opened to reveal grounds that seemed to belong to another era entirely. Mature trees lining a winding drive, glimpses of Lake Michigan glittering between them, and at the center, a stone manor house that managed to be imposing without feeling cold. "It was built in the 1920s, Luca commented from beside me, noting my surprise. "I had it restored rather than replaced. Some things deserve preservation." The loaded statement hung between us, as the convoy circled to the rear of the house, where a discreet medical entrance had been prepared. The next hours passed in a blur of activity, Sophia being settled into a hospital-grade room that someone had taken pains to make child-friendly, with colorful murals on the walls and a window seat overlooking the gardens. Medical staff establishing monitoring routines, security personnel moving with quiet efficiency through the background of it all. Through it all, Luca remained a constant presence, neither hovering nor distant, making decisions when needed, but deferring to medical expertise without hesitation when Sophia's care was concerned. I watched him with new eyes, seeing both the man I'd known 5 years ago and the one he'd become in my absence. As night fell and Sophia's condition stabilized, Dr. Patel insisted I get some rest. "She'll sleep through the night with the medication. You need to recharge. Tomorrow will be critical for both of you." Reluctantly, I allowed myself to be led from Sophia's room to an adjacent suite that connected to hers through a shared bathroom. The space was elegant without being ostentatious. Cream walls, dark wooden furniture, a bed that looked sinfully comfortable after the stress of the past days. "Your things will arrive tomorrow," Luca informed me from the doorway, respecting the boundary of the threshold. "I had Marco retrieve the items you mentioned, plus whatever else seemed personal or sentimental. Thank you." I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything finally catching up to me. For all of this, the medical setup, the rooms, the consideration. He studied me for a moment, his expression softening. "You should know that Mia arrived safely. She's in the East Wing if you want to see her, though I suggested she wait until morning." I nodded, grateful for the space to process one reunion at a time. Tomorrow would be better. Rest then. He turned to leave, then paused. "Elizabeth." I looked up, meeting his gaze across the room. "Welcome home," he said quietly, then closed the door behind him, leaving me alone with the implications of those two simple words. Home. Was that what this place could become? Not just a safe haven during Sophia's recovery, but something more permanent? The thought should have terrified me, but as I lay back on the bed, too exhausted even to change out of my clothes, I found myself considering the possibility with surprising openness. The Luca Moretti who had re-entered our lives was not the same man I'd fled 5 years ago. Or perhaps I was simply seeing him more clearly now, understanding the context for actions I'd once interpreted through the lens of fear and resentment. And I was not the same Elizabeth who had run away in the night, pregnant and terrified. Life with Sophia had hardened something in me, a core of steel that had always been there but never tested. I was no longer someone who could be possessed or controlled, not even by a man as powerful as Luca. Perhaps that was why he'd looked at me differently since our reunion. With respect as well as desire, with recognition of an equal rather than protection of something fragile. These thoughts followed me into dreams, where past and present blended. Sophia running through the gardens I'd glimpsed from the car window, Luca reading to her in the library where we'd first truly spoken. Mia laughing as she taught her niece to bake the Christmas cookies from our childhood. I woke at dawn to the soft beep of my phone. A medical alert programmed to notify me of any change in Sophia's condition. Heart racing. I checked the message to find not an emergency but good news. Her first post-transplant blood work showed promising signs, with donor cells beginning to establish themselves. Relief washed through me as I made my way to her room, finding her still sleeping peacefully, her color already slightly improved. Dr. Patel looked up from her chart with a cautious smile. "Early days," she warned. "But the initial response is encouraging. Her body is accepting the new cells without significant resistance." "Thank God," I breathed, taking my usual place in the chair beside her bed. "There's someone else who will want to hear that news," Dr. Patel noted, nodding toward the door. I turned to find Luca standing there, dressed impeccably as always, but with subtle signs of a sleepless night in the shadows beneath his eyes. When our gazes met, something passed between us. Relief, shared purpose, the unspoken acknowledgement that whatever lay ahead, Sophia's well-being would remain our North Star. "Good news?" he asked, though I suspected he'd already been briefed. "The best possible start," Dr. Patel confirmed. "I've adjusted her medication schedule based on these results. If you'll excuse me, I need to consult with the hematology team." As she left, Luca approached Sophia's bedside with that same careful reverence I'd noticed in the hospital, as if still unsure of his right to be near her, to claim the title of father that biology had granted him. "She has your strength," I said softly. "The doctors in Boston were always amazed at how she handled the treatments, how she bounced back." Pride flickered in his eyes. "She has your resilience," he countered. "I've only ever been stubborn. You're the one who rebuilds, who adapts." The compliment, genuine without agenda, warmed something in my chest. We stood in companionable silence, watching our daughter sleep, until Luca spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about control, about building your own life." His voice was measured, thoughtful. "I want to show you something, when you're ready. Something that might help you see a path forward here." Curiosity piqued. I glanced at him. "What is it?" "Better to show than tell." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. It's not far. Just at the edge of the property. When Sophia wakes and you've had breakfast, if Dr. Patel agrees she's stable enough for you to step away for 30 minutes. I found myself nodding, intrigued despite my caution. All right. 3 hours later, with Sophia awake, fed, and contentedly watching cartoons under Mia's watchful eye, our reunion that morning had been tearful but healing, the first step toward rebuilding what we'd lost. I followed Luca along a stone path that wound through gardens still lush with late summer blooms. Where exactly are we going? I asked as we passed through a gap in a high hedge into an area of the estate I hadn't glimpsed from the house. Patience, he replied, that ghost of a smile playing at his lips again. It's just ahead. The path opened to reveal a clearing near the lake's edge, where a small building stood, new construction, by the look of it, with large windows and a wraparound porch. It resembled nothing so much as an oversized version of my bookshop in Boston, right down to the blue trim I'd chosen for the windows. What is this? I asked, stopping in my tracks. Luca withdrew a key from his pocket, holding it out to me. See for yourself. With hesitant steps, I approached the building, taking the key and unlocking the door. Inside, I found shelves, dozens of them, empty but beautifully crafted, lining walls painted the exact shade of cream I'd used in Boston. A service counter stood at one end, a reading nook with comfortable chairs at the other. It was, in every meaningful way, a bookstore, waiting to be filled. I don't understand, I said, turning back to Luca, who had followed me inside. You built this? When? It was started 3 months ago, after Mia confirmed your location and profession in Boston. He moved further into the space, hands in his pockets, an uncharacteristically casual posture that betrayed a hint of uncertainty. The plan was to offer it to you when the time came for discussion of Sophia's future, a compromise. Independence within safe parameters. The revelation stole my breath. While I'd been oblivious in Boston, he'd been planning not just for our protection, but for my happiness, my sense of purpose. You built me a bookshop, I said, still processing the magnitude of the gesture. I built you a choice, he corrected gently. A way to preserve what matters to you while accommodating what matters to me. It can be a business if you want, or simply a private library you can open to the public or keep it as your sanctuary. The choice is yours. I moved through the space, trailing my fingers along the polished wood of the shelves, trying to reconcile this thoughtful gesture with my long-held image of Luca, as someone who controlled, rather than collaborated. And if I chose to leave altogether? I asked, not because I intended to, but because I needed to understand the parameters. Then this would remain empty until you changed your mind. His voice was steady, certain. I told you yesterday, the only non-negotiable is my presence in Sophia's life. Everything else is conversation. I turned to face him fully, seeing with sudden clarity the man before me. Not the specter I'd fled, not the criminal overlord of Chicago, but a father who would move heaven and earth for his child, a man who had spent 5 years searching for what he'd lost, a partner offering compromise instead of demands. I don't want to leave, I admitted, the truth of it surprising even me. Not yet. Maybe not at all. But I need time, Luca, to adjust, to rebuild trust, to understand what this, I gestured between us, could become. He approached slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wished. When I held my ground, he stopped just close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Time we have, he said softly. The rest we'll figure out together. In the distance, faintly, I could hear Sophia's laughter drifting from the house, our daughter, surrounded by people who would protect her with their lives, beginning her journey toward healing. Ahead of us stretched possibilities I hadn't dared imagine, a life neither completely of Luca's world, nor completely separate from it, but something new we might build together. I reached out, bridging the final distance between us, my fingers intertwining with his. Not a surrender, but a collaboration. Not an ending, but a beginning. Together, I agreed, sealing the promise with a gentle squeeze. The path ahead would not be simple or straight. There would be challenges, medical, emotional, practical. As Sophia recovered, and we navigated the complexities of our new reality. The Vasquez threat still loomed. My sister and I had years of misunderstanding to work through, and Luca and I had a chasm of hurt and absence to bridge. But standing there in the bookshop he had built for me, with the sound of our daughter's laughter carrying on the breeze, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 long years: hope, unfolding like the pages of a new story, one we would write together,